Tech Talk with Matthew Dickerson. Matthew Dickerson. Tech Talk. Sit back and relax. It's time to talk technology.
Hello, global earthers. Welcome, climate observers. Greetings to all those who fear neither vaccination nor the Van Allen belt. Step away from the rabbit hole and be wary of the algorithm. Better still, nestle in for another enlightening episode of Tech Talk with Matthew Dickerson. And who better to nestle into than the bloke with his very own personal bottomless pit of stories from the future? Welcome to the microphone, Matthew Dickerson.
Look, it's worth it just for the intros, James. I enjoy the intros every week. I never know where it's going to go. I never know where it's going to stop.
I was trying to allude to conspiracy theories this time, so anyway.
Perfect. Beautiful. Now, this week, a couple of things about climate change there, actually, that I want to touch on, but I've discovered in my business virtual credit cards. Now, I've used credit cards for a long time in bits of plastic.
As we all do.
That's right. And then we got to the stage where we put them on our phone, and I don't really carry credit cards with me much anymore.
Yeah, same.
Motels seem to be a bit of an issue. I seem to have a bit of an argument with motels and rental cars. They want to see the plastic.
They've gotten together and they've decided we're not going to go for this newfangled gadgetry.
And I remember being at one motel one time, looking at my watch, going, hold on, I just want to check here and tap my watch a few times. No, it's definitely the year 2024. This was last year. I should be able to do things without having.
So have you had any? Take your credit card, your plastic credit card, and put it in that old machine that they swipe, and the old like we used to do in the 80s.
Well, I used to call them the chung machine.
The chung machines,
I remember when
with the carbon paper.
Yeah, when I first started in business, we had the chung machine.
Yep.
And it was a carbon paper for those people out there a bit younger out there. And the way we would actually get paid for those, you'd do the chung, so you'd have all the imprint of the details, and then we'd actually fill in a claim to the bank and submit that all to the bank. And if it was a big enough transaction, we'd ring and get authorisation. Oh, is James good for this $2,000?
Right.
And they'd say, yes, here's your authorisation number. So you guarantee the payments then. So it was a long process. Now I love credit cards when people use them because the money's in your account that night automatically. But some people haven't really got it. Some organisations are still out there with physical credit cards. I've even seen companies using metal credit cards to make them look a bit flasher. Metal credit cards. I know it seems crazy, doesn't it? It's a bit over the top. But what I've discovered is a number of companies, I've researched a few of them and decided on one that do virtual credit cards. So in the old days in our business, we would say, when I say the old days, I'm talking about a week ago, we would say, right, all our staff get a credit card. So we'd get to the bank and we'd say, we've got a new employee, Billy Bloggs has just started. The bank would then authorise or authenticate that person, make sure they had the right ID. If they didn't bank with them, they'd go and do their 100 points. They'd go through a process, and eventually they'd issue a plastic credit card a month or so later, and they'd charge us maybe $5 or $10 a month for the privilege of having that. And so, and each credit card had their own individual credit limit. So that was the old days. Now we've got the ability to actually just create an account, a master account. And then when Billy Bloggs starts with my organisation, I log onto a portal. I say, issue a credit card to Billy Bloggs. And there's the number. Now, he never gets a physical credit card. It's ready to go within minutes. So I found it takes a couple of minutes to set it up. And then Billy just puts that onto his phone and his watch if he wants to. And there you go. He's now got a credit card.
And hadn't anyone feel uncomfortable about that they feel like they need the physical plastic card to put in their wallet? Some people still need it. It's like in an EV, they need to press a button to start the car in order to feel like they've done the job.
In the week that I've been using them so far, no.
No one yet, right, okay.
But
right.
It is early days.
You're going to get some boomer, at heart come in and go, no, I really, really need a plastic card to
maybe.
put in my wallet.
And having said that, most of our employees are tech savvy.
Yes.
So they're quite happy about that.
And if they complain, you go, sure you're in the right job.
That's right, yeah. Just let me check that employment contract. The nice thing about it is you're not paying a fee per card.
Oh, yeah, of course.
You can issue them within a minute or two, and you can revoke them. You can change credit limits on individual cards. You can actually get to the point, and we're going to do this with one of our employees when
you're going to revoke their card on them.
That's right. I won't tell them yet. I'll wait till we've told them.
Surprise!
But you can issue separate credit cards for different projects, or you might have an employee that's working on two different sites, and you say, well, here's credit card 1 for site A and credit card 2 for site B. So rather than try and allocate those different expenses, you just automatically do it because it integrates with your accounting package. Where was
this virtual
weeks ago?
card technology, yeah.
Like it sounds fascinating to me, and just the whole process of all that happening. And there are some companies, again, I've done lots of research before we chose the one that we went with, but some do it as debit cards. So you would have a pool that you would deposit money into, and that's your amount that your individual staff would use, for example. But I'm at the stage now where let's do these for lots of different things. My kids are always asking for money. Right, I'll just set up some virtual credit cards for the kids, and there you go. There's your pool of funds to use. And I just can see so many possibilities. I just wonder, I mean, you've got 4 sets of 4 digits on cards, but do we start to get the stage where, oh no, it's going to be like phone numbers, we're starting to run out of numbers because everyone's issuing all these different virtual credit cards. Yeah, so
that's a lot of credit cards.
That's a lot of credit cards. That is. Anyway, look, it's fascinating. Anyone that's out there that issues credit cards to their staff, I just think it makes sense for that environment.
Go virtual.
For kids.
You don't need plastic anymore.
No, you don't. It's just, I still don't know how I'm going to get around the problem the first time I try and use it at a motel. I'm sure that's going to give someone some problems.
So you've got to give the people the heads up and say, oh, by the way, you're not going to ever be able to stay at a hotel unless you've got cash.
That's right. Yeah. But even that, you try and stay at a motel.
Oh, they wouldn't take your cash. No, they want the credit card because they need just in case.
That's right. And I had the argument
you're in
recently,
a rock band and you destroy the room.
Well, that's it. That's exactly it. I had the argument with a motel recently. I said, there it is. I'm happy to pay for the room. You've got my credit card there, but we need an imprint. But I haven't got it. I said, why? And they said, well, you might run at the minibar. I said, okay. Well, you've got all my details.
Yeah.
You've got everything you know about me.
You just need the number.
That's right.
Like the number on the front, the CCV on the back, and the expiry date.
Surely
and
that's
it's
enough.
all your money.
Yeah, that's right. And even if I do run out, you know the car I'm driving, you know my reg. Like, surely you've got some way of saying it's okay. We don't need the plastic credit card.
That click-clack machine still.
That's right.
All right, now in today's episode, we're all about the future. There's a surprise for you. Today, we're going to look into some neat options for the visually impaired. We'll find out how AI is fighting for good in climate litigation and protecting our submarine cable network. And we're going to check out how the EV market is going in Australia in light of current political events. But we kick off today with another one of those times when fantasy is brought into reality. Now, fans of the Marvel Universe will, of course, be familiar with Captain America's shield. It's remarkable in many ways, but it renders him pretty much invincible. And that has given some engineering geeks some big ideas. Matt, Hollywood has passed on another gift to science, or so it appears.
We're getting there. We're not quite there yet.
Right.
But
so we haven't discovered vibranium yet.
No.
That's because there's no way it can exist. But anyway.
That's right. There's a few little minor issues there with
just look in
physics
your periodic
and
table.
chemistry.
Yeah. Okay.
That's right. So I've been listening to someone who keeps telling me material science. I'm being convinced. I've been brainwashed, or I've heard it so many
at least
times.
Something stuck.
That's right. And this is a really interesting process. So you mentioned vibranium. Of course, Captain America has his vibranium shield, and it's pretty impressive. It can resist fire. It can resist basically anything that's shot at it.
You can throw it and it'll come back to you.
Well, that's a pretty cool part as well, isn't it? I'm not quite sure about that one.
Right.
That's
they've got to work on it. But anyway,
they've got to work
I'm going to be really judging this story and just see how close they get.
Well, that's fair enough, because this is actually taught in a university in Pennsylvania in the US, where a lecturer there says, I want to get kids excited about science, I want to get kids to really be intrigued. So he runs a course called Engineering Superheroes. So essentially takes some of the things that we see in the fictional world and says, let's see how realistic those things are.
See how close you can get to Tony Stark.
Right. So, and we keep talking about Tony Stark.
Yes, we do.
That energy.
We do.
So he gives some practical demonstrations using some basic engineering principles of things like, hammers and battery packs and shields, and starts to just get kids thinking about material science. So how can we start to really think about that? Now, one of the things he does talk about is there's a lot of different ways you can combine the elements. Let's say, forget the 118 elements on the periodic table. Let's just focus on the 94 or so.
92 naturally occurring ones.
Right.
Yeah.
So take 92 naturally occurring elements, and again, if you just assume that we could put 3 elements together in the same ratio, and I did the calculation on 94, so it's a little bit out, but there's 141,942 unique sets of 3 from 94. Now, again, of course, as we know, there are different ratios of atoms in a molecule as well. That was just assuming they were all the same number of, 1 to 1 to 1.
Yeah.
When you start to talk about ratios, when you start to talk about different isotopes, different combinations.
Yeah, combinations and
Already there is a database of 200 million different combinations of elements that we've got out there. So when you start to think about that, you think we probably haven't discovered everything yet.
Yes,
we
that's
probably
right.
have some materials that we
kids,
haven't got
get
there.
into it, kids, and go and make something that we really need, like vibranium.
We do need
shields.
vibranium. So when you start to talk about that, and this is the sort of thing that this particular lecturer goes through, you start talking about things like tungsten carbide, tightly packed atoms. So that would resist compressive forces. But if I'm standing behind the shield that's really strong, can resist those compressive forces, they're going to be transferred to me.
That's right. Yeah, it's going to pass straight through the shield and straight into you. And
That's
so
right.
That's not so good. But if you can spread that force across a larger surface area, then that's going to reduce your impact.
That's right. And so then you start to talk about ceramics. And so the ability for a ceramic, for example, to resist fire, resist heat. So again, if I can stand behind that, now that little shield mightn't protect my whole body, but I start to get things like the space shuttle, which had ceramic tiles on it to resist that re-entry heat. So you start talking about things like that. The real trick is really being able to have something that can absorb that energy and then bounce back, which is what effectively vibranium does. It says, I'm going to take whatever you throw at me and I'm going to give it back to you. And that's fantastic. But when we think about that, we don't have a lot of elements that can deform and return, but we're actually getting there with some, we've talked about before, nitinol. We've talked about wheels on Mars rovers that can deform. They're a metal that deforms but then goes back to its original shape. So we start to get some little bits and pieces of that. But again, if you can just get kids thinking and dreaming.
Yeah, the more heads that are thinking about this, and that's it, the dreaming. It's the people who think, oh, let's try to do this. People who don't necessarily understand the boundaries to start off with. That's...
Give it to a 5-year-old.
Give it to a 5-year-old.
Say, what do you want? And then you don't know those constraints. So I love the idea.
Or give it to a Hollywood producer.
Yeah, that's true too.
The same thing. And they'll just say, oh, this is what we're going to do.
That's
and
right.
then all the science nerds go back, oh, yeah, they could never do that. But
yeah, that's right. But maybe the never becomes possible.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've out of Star Trek, we've now got these little personal communicators that everyone carries around with them.
Yeah, that's right. And
Yeah.
of course, the Dick Tracy watch.
The Dick Tracy watches, yeah. So Hollywood and the whole idea of fantasy and storybooks and stuff. Yeah.
And even Maxwell Smart. We haven't got a shoe that we wear
Or
around.
the cone of silence.
Or a cone of silence.
Maybe we could get into making one of those.
I forgot about the cone of silence. But we don't wear a shoe phone around, but we carry a phone around with us, which again was revolutionary. Maxwell Smart must have been late 60s that was around? Maybe early 70s. So, anyway, keep dreaming.
It just requires dreamers.
It does require
people
dreamers.
to see, okay, well, how can we put that together to get it to work? Now, not to be out-nerded, computer nerds at the very top of their game can get very bored and frustrated with writing lines and lines and lines of code to create programs that do fancy things. And when they get bored, they get creative. And suddenly coding gets competitive. And that can lead it into a dark, dark place. Matt, what the hell is the International Obfuscated C Code Contest?
It's a crazy contest. It's a contest where you try and write some code, or you do write some code, and it is meant to be intentionally difficult to understand, but it's got to perform some surprising or maybe a complex
So it's got to
task.
confuse all the other nerds.
Correct. That's the idea.
And then do something actually constructive.
Maybe not constructive, maybe interesting.
Maybe just interesting. Okay.
Just
all right.
something.
Okay. We won't go as
It's
deep
got
as
to do
constructive.
something. It's got to be. It's
Yeah,
got to
right.
have some outcome, and it's limiting. It's 4,993 bytes in size. I don't know why they came up with that number. I was trying to research why
It's not a number to
4,993.
just sort of randomly land on.
And possibly that's all it was, but I thought there might have been some significance, a birth date or something, but I couldn't find anything about that. There were two gentlemen, Landon Knoll and Larry Bassel, came up with this contest back in 1984. So it's been running almost continuously since then. It had a bit of a vacation during COVID. I'm not sure why, because you probably didn't need to get together for programming.
You can do this remotely. If there's anything you could do remotely, it's got to be this, right?
I thought so. So not sure what happened in COVID times, but the whole idea is, and I remember when I was at uni, the whole thing was put enough comments. I used to get in trouble for not putting enough comments. I just wanted to write the code, and that was it, done. And they're like, where are your comments? If someone else looked at it, I don't care about someone else looking at it, but obviously good programming. Yeah, that's right. I knew what I was doing. Good programming. And I must admit, now I look at code that I write, even if I wrote only 6 or 12 months ago, I'm glad I've got those comments there because I had to remember what I did here.
You forgot why you did this.
That's right. So it does make sense. So the whole opposite, and this is where this was all born, was looking at bad code. These two particular gentlemen were looking at badly written code, poorly written code. Went, this is so annoying. And then they started playing with the idea of, let's see the worst example we can get of poorly written code. And then they came up with this competition, the IOCCC, the, as you said, International Obfuscated C Code Contest. And so to give you an idea of what has been some winners or the standouts in previous years. So, for example, there was one that was a flight simulator where the code itself was written to be shaped like an aircraft. So just a bit different, just a bit unusual.
Right.
So you look at the code, standing back at it, and it looked like an aircraft.
Very clever.
Another one was a functional chess engine in just 1,255 characters. You could beat it easily because it wasn't very clever, but it didn't matter. It could play chess.
But it could play chess, and it was written. Sorry, what was special about it? It was
1,255 characters.
Right.
So not too bad
not
for
too
a chess
bad.
game.
Yeah, right.
Another one was a program that deliberately crashed itself and then used its own memory dump to start as the next execution. So it could actually run a normal program as it crashed and then recovered itself from where it crashed. So just various things like that. So they give awards to categories like most enigmatic, most irrational, best abuse of the rules, but you don't know what the various categories are going to be till after the contest closes. So you put your entry in and then you might win one of the categories they create.
Accidentally. Yeah, right. Okay.
So quite fascinating.
Well, who said they didn't have a sense of humour?
That's right. The contest has started. It started in the middle of February, so the contest is now up and running. You've got until May to go and look for it. Just go and Google IOCCC and see what you can come up
Start
with.
punching away your code.
That's right, and see how you go
And
with
be
it.
thinking left of centre. Now, we love our EVs here at Tech Talk and acknowledge that recent movements by prominent bodies in the US have made Teslas somewhat unpalatable to many EV fans. Is it little surprise then that I'm going to start again. Is it any surprise that for an emerging marketplace like Australia, that economically priced Chinese EV brands have moved in with a bit of a surge, Matt?
I've actually seen some funny bumper stickers, and they say things like, I bought this car before Elon went crazy.
Yep. Yeah, and Tesla owners are making apologies and excuses and whatnot. It's still a good car, though.
That's right. Ignore he's not the owner, ignore the CEO, just focus on the car. So when Elon goes a bit crazy, China thinks there's an opportunity here. Now, I actually want to talk a little bit about Chinese.
The window is open for them. Yeah.
Absolutely. I want to talk about Chinese manufacturing. So we seem to have this fear about Chinese cars. Seems to be some little fear just about China. Maybe it's driven by Trump, I'm not sure. But if we look at China, then in 2023, I couldn't get data for 2024 yet, but in 2023, Australia imported $108 billion worth of products that were made in China. They were our number one country that we brought products in from, almost double number two, which was the US. So we seem to rely on Chinese products for a whole bunch of stuff, but we're comfortable with that for most things, I think. Like some people look at a tag on a shirt and they go, made in China, damn it, while they hand over the money and buy it and then put the shirt on. Then you look at globally, China exported US $3.51 trillion in goods to the world. That was 14% of all the world's exports.
Yeah, they're making a lot of stuff.
They are. And so we seem comfortable with that mostly. Maybe some people don't love it, but we seem comfortable, and they seem to have been in everything. It's mobile phones, it's your computer, it's clothing, it's so many different products, shoes, it's so many different products that China make. But when it comes to cars, they haven't done that well. So they've tried a couple of car manufacturing, like a couple of brands, but they've really done that well. So
I'm thinking about Chinese car brands that I know of, EV brands, and it's only BYD. What are some other names that I might read?
Well, I'm going to hit you with some in a minute, but if we go back to petrol cars.
Yeah.
What did they do in petrol cars? There wasn't much around
I can't
at all.
name a Chinese brand petrol
I think
car.
there was the Great Wall. Was about
Oh,
the
Great
only
Wall.
one.
There you go. Sorry.
That's
All right.
about- and
No,
that's
I
only
have heard of
fairly
it.
recently, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, and when you think about that, you had, well, really, you've got Japan with Toyota. You've got the US, which probably had General Motors was probably their biggest, and Ford for a while.
Quite a few coming out of Korea as well.
Yeah, Hyundai is now getting there,
Yeah.
and obviously Volkswagen is probably
Ssangyong, was that Korean as well?
Ssangyong Musso. That's a good question. I don't know
Good,
that one. Yeah.
Hmm.
But Volkswagen and obviously Germany has got a good
Germany
tradition.
had a big name. Oh, and that's kind of where I clutch on to. Remember in the Second World War, Mercedes-Benz was still selling cars around the world.
Yeah.
During the Second World War. so I feel a little bit better about my Tesla right, in this climate. Okay, but moving on.
That's fair.
Sorry,
okay.
I digress.
That's right. But so Germany, US, Japan seem to have really owned the worldwide car market for many years. And China, despite all the other manufacturing, hasn't really done that well. So don't know why. Don't know why it was about cars. I think they had a bit of a go and their quality wasn't that good. Maybe safety standards weren't that great. So that's a bit of an issue. But at the moment, we've got this real change happening. And when I think about other changes that have happened across the world, I think about Nokia, obviously the number one phone manufacturer for a number of years until those smartphones came along and they didn't really rate them. Next thing you know, they blinked and Apple and Samsung just took over the market and Nokia is really no more. Even Ford. Ford was once the world's top car maker, but when the oil crisis hit in the early 70s, they were producing these big cars, and you see the old American TV shows and movies, you see these great big lumping cars.
Yeah. Oh,
and along came Toyota with these fuel-efficient smaller cars, and because everyone was paying so much for petrol, they went, hold on, that's the go. And Ford never really recovered their position. Even Kodak, we've talked about Kodak, it's a common example where they patented the first digital camera, but they didn't want to go to market with it because they're selling so many rolls of film. And again, they blinked, and next thing you know, they lost their position. So what might be happening now is that we might see history repeating itself in the car industry, in my opinion. So this is not any industry strategists out there. It's really my opinion that we're probably getting to the point now where we're seeing China jump on this market. And because they haven't got all this big history of manufacturing cars, they're starting like that 5-year-old where they're going, okay, let's just start with a blank sheet of paper. How do we go about this?
Well, that was Tesla's blessing, wasn't it? Because they went back and they just said, right, we don't make cars, but hell, what would we do if we were starting from scratch?
Yeah.
And this is what my worry is for some of these established car companies when they have been creating, or they're essentially converting petrol cars into electric cars, and it's not been as efficient.
We've seen that, and I see examples of traditional manufacturers that have come out with their EV model, and you look at it and you go,
you've taken up all that luggage space with a big battery.
That's right. Or I saw one traditional manufacturer came up with their EV, and they had a transmission tunnel because that was what they already had in the manufacturing plant.
It's already moulded. We're using those now.
There's no drive shaft. Why have you got a transmission tunnel there? So things like that. So China has done well. They've invested heavily. So they've said, let's go and work out ways we can get this market. So the government's helped out a lot there. They've invested with EV subsidies. They've tightened their emission regulations. They've gotten to the point where they understand safety standards around the world. We've got to make these cars with that. And now suddenly you've got this whole ecosystem, and the big advantage that China's got is they can make batteries in China. That's something they've been able to do in the past. So a battery's a pretty important part of the EV. So now we jump forward and we go, they've got a pretty good supply chain of everything they need. They've got some vertical integration of what they need in the actual EV. And now suddenly they're getting to the point where they're producing cars that are good, even great. They're cheap. And so BYD, even the first BYDs I saw, and you mentioned that as one manufacturer, the first BYDs I saw had maybe okay build quality, and they seemed okay, but it didn't take long. And the next version or the next iteration, I went, wow, these are pretty good actually.
Well, I haven't heard anything bad about the BYDs.
No. So you'll see brands now coming up that are like BYD, but Geely, Polestar, Lotus, Neo, Xpeng, Li Auto, MG, these are all Chinese brands that are going to invade the Australian market over this year. and getting to the point where you're going to see small SUVs under 30 grand for an EV. You're going to see prices suddenly where people want them to be. And that's one thing that people often say to you and I, oh, yes, but they're too expensive. Well, suddenly...
Well, that's happening less and less, I've noted.
It is, that's right. So BYD's Atto 3 has become a bestseller in Australia, undercutting Tesla's Model Y. MG has got some success with its MG4. So the science there, I suppose. Even Polestars, I've hired a few Polestars recently when I've been away somewhere, and I typically try and hire whatever brand that particular company's offering, but I've seen more and more Polestars with rental companies.
And they're getting a very good rap, yeah.
Yeah, so I just think that some of the legacy automakers are struggling, and even if you look back decade by decade over the last few decades, so the top 10 car makers 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, it was dominated by Toyota, General Motors, Volkswagen, some of those brands that you see that are so common on the roads, but suddenly you're going to see, and the latest one, I can only get to 2023, suddenly BYD slipped in at number 9 spot on our top 10 car sales for the year. So suddenly...
That is significant.
That's right, they've come out of nowhere and they're there, but all these other brands we're going to see. So I think that China certainly has been the factory, the world's factory for electronics, textiles, consumer goods, but I just see that the future is electric, as we know, but the future is electric and Chinese. So it's a big change there. So keep an eye out for some of those brands, some of those brands that aren't familiar now but will suddenly be familiar, and just keep an eye. I mean, BYD has been quite clear. They've said by 2030, we're going to topple Toyota as the number one car manufacturer in the world. It's a fairly lofty ambition.
Fairly well.
Now, we know when VW said they're going to topple Toyota, they had to cheat. That's when they came out with Dieselgate to try and cheat. But I don't think BYD is going to cheat. They're just going to produce EVs at good prices and with good features.
The winds of change are blowing.
Oh, they are indeed.
For a while there, a decade or so ago, Spotify shared the music streaming market with very few competitors. But in the age of the internet, if you snooze, you lose. So the pressure on tried and tested apps like Spotify is to innovate or die. Matt, what is new in Spotify?
Well, what's new in Spotify is something that's kind of a bit old in Spotify. 4 years ago, they announced they're going to have a hi-fi option. So lossless audio for streaming. That was 4 years ago. They're finally
Hi-fi. Now, that's a word I haven't heard for a long time. But anyway, keep going,
So this year, they're finally going to release it. Now, let's just go back a little bit. One of the things with streaming, when streaming first started, was that they wanted to compress the audio, and MP3 is the most common format for that, because we didn't have huge data plans and we didn't have the ability to transmit that data at great speeds. So MP3, fantastic. You take a typical 3-minute song, depending on the bit rate, it might be anywhere from, say, 3 megabytes in size to maybe 7 megabytes in size, around that sort of number. And that's depending on whether your bit rate, say, 128 kilobits per second or 320 kilobits per second. But that's the sort of size. So when you're streaming, you listen to that 3-minute song, you used up 3 megs of your data plan for that month. So not too bad. So you can get away with that streaming. And then, of course, NBN came along and that made things a bit faster. We had unlimited data plans and all the rest of it. So some companies said, well, do we need this compression anymore? And I can't tell the difference, James, but some people said it's nowhere near as good a quality as CD, and CD is nowhere near as good a quality as vinyl. So
I'm the same with you. It sounds like music.
It sounds like music. And when you listen, think about when you listen to it most of the time. You're in the car, you got a bit of road noise around, or chatting in the car, or you're out for a run, you got a bit of wind noise around. It's unusual for you to go and listen to your audio in a perfect room that's got the acoustics absolutely set up perfectly so you can hear every little bit of...
I just want something I can sing along to.
That's right. That's all you need. So some people say MP3 compression is not good enough. So then you start talking about, well, let's go lossless. But the problem is this. If you go lossless, say, for example, with a WAV file, a typical 3-minute song might be 32 megabytes in size, so 10 times the size of what it might be with an MP3. FLAC, F-L-A-C, is a probably more common lossless audio, which gives you a little bit of compression, but still same quality. 22, 23 megs in size, so still pretty large.
Still large,
That's
yeah.
right. So you listen to one song and you're going to consume maybe 8 to 10 times the amount of data. But again, we've got these huge data plans and much better speeds now. So it makes sense. So Spotify is saying, well, we can do lossless audio now. For all those audiophiles out there that really want to listen to that best quality audio, then we've got the technology. So why
You've got
not?
to make sure you've got a good set of speakers then.
Well, good headphones, good speakers. Can you really tell the difference? That's a question I would have for our listeners. Can you really tell the difference if you're listening on headphones?
Well, we were talking about losing one of your earbuds when one of your earbuds dies.
Yep.
One of my earbuds died this week. And so it's just like, oh, well, I don't need the best quality file to come through anymore.
That's right.
Because I'm only listening in one ear.
I don't need stereo anymore, do I? So just send it through in mono. So I think this is interesting, but they're going to charge for it. So Apple now do lossless audio. They've done that for a little while now, but Spotify is saying on top of your typical, say, $12 a month you'll pay for Spotify, they're going to charge you $5 or $6 a month. And I'm interested in that. I'm interested whether people will pay that extra money. I'm interested whether they lose some clients because some people say, well, I'm not paying that because Apple do it for free, so I'll just go over to Apple. Interesting to see, but we're getting there with our audio quality, and that means people can listen to you and I in better quality. No, this is still compressed audio, so they're not getting every little sniffle that we do.
Surround Dolby Digital surround sound, like at the cinema.
I like it. Good sound effect.
Ray-Ban's Meta glasses have been around for a while now, but unlike their hapless Google Glasses predecessor, they seem to have carved out something of a niche in the market. And Matt, these babies have some real potential, even for people who are visually impaired.
I love the fact that people that are visually impaired are grabbing hold of these. So they've sold about 2 million units so far. They were released at the end of 2023, so they've gone okay over that time frame. They want to get up to the stage where they're selling 10 million units by 2026. One of the ways they might do that is by appealing to the visually impaired people out there in society. Yeah. So these have got cameras, they've got microphones, they've got an AI assistant, they can identify objects, they can read text out loud, they can provide real-time information. So you start to think, well, hold on, if I am visually impaired, well, I can actually use this to tell me what a sign says or tell me if there's a car coming along. I can have a conversation with my glasses. Obviously, you've got them connected to your phone that's in your pocket. So you can start to use these. And this wasn't something I absolutely guarantee Meta never said, let's go out and make some glasses for the visually impaired. They just wanted glasses that were cool.
It's another case of people who have found a use for something have adopted it, and it's taking off in that form.
Exactly right. And maybe now when they see there's a market there for it, they might start to modify,
fine-tune.
Change. Yeah, exactly right. So they've been used, users have been talking about they're being used for navigation, reading, helping with cooking, reading a menu when they're cooking, for example, all sorts of things. Because again, as you do with any of the AI tools out there, you can have a conversation with the tool. So you can say, please tell me what that sign says, or tell me if there are any cars coming along now. Now, do I trust AI enough to pick up if a car's coming along? Oh, I don't know, but anyway.
That's a risk.
It's a risk. But you trust a dog, and a dog goes through a lot of training to help you get around, to navigate around, and a dog can decide whether a car is coming or not. So surely AI should be able to.
I had a friend at university who used to just say, cars will stop. And he'd walk out and just see how they went.
I love the confidence.
Oh, yeah.
That was before people were playing on their phones while they drove their cars, though. So now maybe they don't see you. If they see you, they'll probably stop. But it's a whole range of things. People even said they've used them to help them get dressed in the morning, to pick out clothing colours that were good together. So a whole range of things. But I just, there's a slight concern, I suppose. So some experts are saying that if they're going to be used as an accessibility tool, maybe they should undergo some medical grade testing, not just, hey, this is a fun thing, use it, and then start using it in ways that it wasn't really designed for.
They need to have some sort of deeper clearance from a higher body, yeah?
Maybe, yeah. The good part is that the glasses are still expensive, but not stupidly so. So $460 you'll pay for them in Aussie dollars. But
well,
when you
considering
look
what people will pay for a phone these days.
Well, exactly right. But also, when I started to look at things that people, or amounts that people paid for some tools to help them with their visual impairment, I found a dot pad, which was something that can help people that have got visual impairment, $18,500.
Wow.
When I found the Victor Reader Stream, so something that helps you read signs, etc., $850. So if you get glasses that are a lot cheaper than that, sure, they may not be medical grade, but they're probably exposed to a lot of people that maybe don't have the finances to be able to participate in some of the other tools that are out there.
You've just
for
pointed
blind
out
people.
just how hard it is to be someone who's really visually impaired in a big way.
If you've got to start paying those kinds of money. So anyway, hopefully it's going to be better. Of course, the Google glasses, people used to be called glass holes. That was glass holes with a G there. With those, these seem to be going much better than that. And again, the secret filming is still something that's a bit of a concern to people.
Yeah, but it's just interesting what takes off and who adopts it and how are they adopted. It's sometimes very hard to predict, isn't it? Now, one industry that seemed to be a very early adopter of AI was the legal profession. With some critical lessons learned in 2023, AI has matured quickly and is set to perform as something of a powerhouse paralegal now in climate litigation cases. Matt, is that the sound of an unstoppable force meeting an immovable object? Easy for me to say.
Well, as much as AI can be used for the legal battles, and that's what it's going to be used for, is to take on big oil, for example, take on some big climate emitters.
AI is this unstoppable force.
That's right. But then there's nothing stopping big oil from using AI as well.
Yeah,
so,
as a defence.
So we end up with an AI arms race from
So
both
it's just
sides.
AI arguing with AI.
That's right.
And
who's going to
and
win?
an AI judge making a decision at the end.
That's right. I think it's going to be similar, though, to tobacco. When tobacco companies were kind of talking about the fact that it's wonderful that we have tobacco, and I've seen these wonderful old ads that have got a doctor saying, I prefer Camel.
Yes.
And apologies to Camel out there. I'm not trying to target Camel, but they were some ads that they were running. So
that's right.
sure, of all the smokes that they could have chosen, they preferred Camel.
9 out of 10 doctors prefer Winfield. You know, it's just
all that sort of stuff. That's
and
right.
There's one doctor who's smoking some other brand.
That's right. But they didn't say, by the way, it's going to kill you.
Yeah.
And so obviously we've had some cases with things like asbestos, things like tobacco. And the next big one, I think, is going to be around climate change, because we know about climate change. Insurance companies have known about climate change for decades. So it's not as if it's just suddenly popped up. These big companies know about it, and they're still, at this stage, they're still trying to greenwash. They're still trying to put out misinformation. We've seen famous cases or infamous cases where these companies have paid marketing companies millions of dollars to go out there and influence what social media users think.
Well, they use a lot of reductive arguments as well, and it's a case of, oh, look, I've been down to Manly Beach and I've noticed that the sea level hasn't risen yet.
That's right.
Yeah.
The one-off specific example.
These reductive arguments.
That's right. Yeah, let's look at the big picture there. So you're right, and people can get easily fooled by that because they'll talk about one thing that happened to them, and so that means that everything else is okay. But it doesn't quite work like that. So I had a cigarette. I tried a cigarette when I was about 15 and coughed and spluttered. I haven't got lung cancer, so it must be okay. So that sort of...
Well, that was the sort of arguments that they were doing, passing out on the in the mid-'80s, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got a 95-year-old uncle who's been smoking all his life, and he's still okay.
He's okay, that's right. And the same sort of arguments like, well, we had droughts back in the 1920s and we had heavy rainstorms, so it must be all okay. So all that stuff. But
anyway,
in the Netherlands, there was a precedent with what's known as the Urgenda case, URGNDA, where the Dutch government was sued to enforce climate change. So the Dutch government suddenly was having some class action against them because they hadn't taken enough action around climate change. So you're seeing some little examples like that. Research from the 2022 Pakistan floods said that $30 billion of extra damage was caused because climate change had exacerbated the damage that was done.
I remember that. It was something like, was it a third or a half of Pakistan was underwater?
It was crazy. Yeah, that's right. And again, so we're seeing examples like this.
So we're seeing more violent weather and what we would regard as natural catastrophes,
So what's going to happen is that AI is going to be thrown at this. So you've got teams of AI throwing it, let's go and prosecute some of these big emitters. So big oil is obviously the target there. So what's going to happen with all that? Maybe some of these companies will say, we better start doing something a bit more responsible now.
I wouldn't be surprised if big oil isn't heavily invested in renewable energies right now.
Yeah, well, we're seeing a bit of that already around this area. We've seen Shell and BP start to build solar farms, start to build batteries.
I can see the writing's on the wall.
But the other thing I started to think about was, at what point do you get some of these large companies saying, okay, we now know about it? Do they actually put their hand up and say, we know about it, let's take some action? Or do they still want to keep burying their head in the sand and say, let's see how we can get away from it?
I reckon it's the tobacco doctor argument, that we're going to just see how long we can go with this and push against it just to get every dollar out we can out of the oil while it still lasts.
What about coal? I still wonder about coal. People that are still, or companies are still mining coal right now. At what point? And I saw an ad the other day where there was a person there, a young engineering person there saying, we're really good with our coal and Australian coal is really important.
Of course.
How
of course, Trump started talking about clean coal and how, and there is clean coal and there's dirty coal, but
even clean coal is not as clean as
that's right. It's not burning coal, right?
That's right. Yeah, that's right. That's the cleanest coal. Anyway, it's interesting. I think we'll see, and we've seen some cases where AI has been used and they've had bad outcomes from a legal perspective where they've made up precedents. I think we're getting a bit better than that now, but there is just so much complexity. And that's one thing that AI is good at, taking an incredibly complex discussion, argument, data set, and then narrowing
teasing
that down.
Bits out.
So anyway, it's going to be very interesting to see where we go in the next 5 years.
Certainly will be. Now, far from a passing fad, solar technology just keeps on building and developing and building and developing and building and developing. As a green alternative, renewable tech faces the constant challenge, though, of being recyclable. But the Scandinavians have been at it again. Who would have thought? Rewriting the rulebook for green energy tech. Matt, they're really leading the charge from the front in this, aren't they? Recycling our renewables.
And it's one of the things that people often talk about. Oh, no, you take those off your roof in 25 years' time and you're going to fill up landfill. I'm actually intrigued by how concerned people are about the environment when it comes to renewable components. So they're suddenly concerned about wind turbines killing birds or solar panels in landfill, and you think, so do you use plastic straws? Do you actually care about the environment in so many other parts of your life? But no, it's a convenient argument. So with solar panels, we know they're getting better at recycling, but this latest breakthrough basically uses a water-based solvent to recycle solar cells.
Right.
Now, let me go back a step. The solar market, the global solar market, has been expanding by about 24% annually for the last decade. That's big growth, isn't it?
That's enormous.
Even if it started from a low base a decade ago, 24% a year starts to get pretty big pretty quick.
Yeah, that's some acceleration.
Over 25 million homes worldwide have installed solar panels already. Wow. So that's basically, well, it's not the population of Australia because that's 25 million homes. So we've got 25 million people here, so 25 million homes across the world. But the projection is by 2030, 100 million homes across the world will have solar. Wow. There's a lot of solar being produced, great, a lot of solar being put on rooftops, but at some stage in the future, you're going to have to do something with those. So what they've done at a university in Sweden is they've come up with a water-based solvent. It's got water, sodium acetate, sodium iodide, and hypophosphorus acid. So water-based, but some other bits in there as well. And they put that together in about 80 degrees Celsius, put the solar panels in, and then stick it under that solution for 20 minutes, and then pull it out and spin it at 5,000 reps per minute for 3 minutes, and that separates the various components. So you're able to basically pull out all those. So a bit of a process, but still from that, they're able to get about 96.6% of the original components out.
Wow.
Yeah. Use those again in other solar panels and they're basically brand new. So as it makes sense, if you take those raw components, rebuild a solar panel, then it is like it's brand new. So you're not getting a degradation of the solar panel because you're using recycled components. You're getting a new solar panel. But getting back, let's call it 97%, getting back 97% of that solar panel.
We kind of knew this was going to happen, didn't we?
We've talked about it before.
It was only a matter of time. And I know that there's been a lot of universities. I think University of New South Wales has got a big program going of trying to work out how to recycle renewable energy machinery and whatnot.
Yep.
But, we just knew it was just a matter of time before we found a way to recycle. Now, this might not be the best way, but it's a way.
It's a way. And the critical part here is that we want to get to the stage where we reduce our dependence on the extraction of all those critical minerals that are in there. And obviously, that's what you'll do with these. And I'm not sure if there are big bunches of landfill with solar panels in them. I don't really know of any. But if there are, let's dig them up and let's apply some method that we use in the future, because that might be easier than digging up the actual critical minerals that we have to mine at some point somewhere in the first place. So anyway, it's certainly good news, and I think we'll see more and more of this good news.
Fantastic. And furthering the discussion on recycling, Australia's performance on this front has had its ups and downs over the last 75 years or so. From glass milk bottles in the 50s to single-use plastic bottles in the 70s and 80s, recycling has been one of those paths of public good intention, a priority only if it wasn't too inconvenient. Matt, it's 2025 now. How are we faring today on the environmental report card these days?
Well, it's going back to the future. I actually remember a school excursion we went through in a place called All Bells Drinks, Orbell, All Bells, or maybe it was apostrophe S or S, I can't remember, but All Bell was the person's name that had this factory that made soft drinks in our community. And I remember going through that as a kid because one of the things that was fascinating was all these bottles that were returned, and they had this washing process where they went through a washer and flushed all the whatever was left in them, and they were brand new bottles again, and off they went, and we filled them up with, we didn't, but they filled them up with soft drink again. It seemed to kind of make sense. Even milk bottles.
Educational exercise that really made its impact for you.
Obviously. But even I was a milko when I was a kid at school. We used to go and deliver milk. You'd run around with 12 bottles of milk in each little container in each hand. And
Did you have the sachets of milk? Did you have those?
Didn't have sachets.
There was sachets, and you had like a special pourer that you placed your sachet in, and you just cut the corner off.
Right.
I remember vaguely those from the late 70s.
I don't remember. We used to have a thing called a dubbo, which was the simplest sweet in the world. It was a bit like a sachet, and it was filled with cordial frozen, and then you'd buy it, you'd cut off the end, or you rip off the end with your teeth, and then you just suck out the cordial, the frozen cordial that was inside. But even the milk bottles, what I used to love about that is you go and deliver these milk, and you used to have to remember the whole milk run about how many bottles people got and what day they got them on, that sort of thing. But the one that I liked the best, the clients that we had on the milk run the best, were the ones that were called bottle for bottle. So whatever number of bottles they left out, you gave them that number of bottles, and they'd leave the money out for that, and you'd pick up the money. So
it was also a bit of music as you ran around, the music bottles chinking.
That's right, exactly right.
Those little carriers.
So you'd put down people would leave 2 bottles out. So you put down 2 bottles, you pick up the 2 empty bottles, and you take them back, and they go back to the dairy. They'd be flushed out and filled again. So that all seemed to work okay. And then damn Coca-Cola, who in the 70s introduced plastic bottles into Australia, probably around the world as well. But we then started to get the stage where we just made bottles out of plastic. It was cheaper and easier, I guess, to just produce new bottles, and away we went until we find out that all this plastic wasn't great. So then we introduced...
It wasn't going anywhere. It's still...
It wasn't. It wasn't break. These are great. They don't break down. Hold on. These aren't so great. They don't break down. And then, of course, we got to PET bottles, and that was great. But even when we used to send our PET bottles to China, we only really got back about 40% of the bottles that were put out into the community. So the recycling wasn't great. And, of course, then China said we're not taking them anymore. So that was a bit of a problem. And we've got our return and earn scheme now. So you get paid 10 cents when you bring back your various plastic bottles, etc. So that's good. But I think there might be a bit of a move to go back to glass. Glass seems pretty hardy unless you drop it. But Germany is leading the way there. Germany is really saying, and they've got a deposit scheme as well, but they're saying we should just go back to glass. Glass seemed like a pretty good substance. Again. Yeah, that's right.
And it is a good substance to use, yeah.
And in Germany, they're getting a 98% return rate. They are doing a return and earn type scheme as well, but 98% return rate. So you don't have to keep manufacturing new bottles. Sure, it's more energy intensive to manufacture a glass bottle than a plastic bottle, but you can keep using it over and over and over. I don't know how many times, but it'd be a lot. You can keep going with that, flushing out that glass bottle and then refilling it again. And they're getting to the stage where they're standardising. So if you're Coca-Cola and you want your groovy little pattern on your bottle, sorry, you can't do that. You're going to have a standard shape of glass bottle so that everyone can use the same washing methods and the same refilling methods. That kind of makes sense. So are we going to get to the stage where we do this in Australia? Well, I think the first step was return and earn. So once you've got that and you're encouraging people to bring it back and you get paid their 10 cents. And, of course, charities sometimes use that. Individuals use that to pay for weddings and all sorts of things. So the return and earn is doing what we wanted to do, that it's actually getting it brought back. But maybe we should start thinking about changing to glass, going back to the future.
We had stories about making things out of timber in recent weeks, and now we're going back to glass.
I know. Glass and timber.
Goodness me.
What a concept.
Now, it's probably something that you spend zero time thinking on, but Google yourself a map of undersea cables. The mess of stuff that spans under the Pacific, the Atlantic, pretty much every sea and ocean on the planet, it's something to behold. And when something happens to cut a line kilometres below the surface, pandemonium ensues and the repair is expensive beyond belief. And that's where AI has come to the rescue, Matt.
It's coming to the rescue because it does impact so much. Now, under the seas, we've got power, we've got communications, we've got fuel. So we've got things that are pretty important, and they take a long time to go and construct an underground or underwater thing from country to country. Yeah. So when something happens to it, it's not a, oh, Jim, can you slip around? You can't use, like I talked about last week, Tommy tape. You can't go a bit of Tommy tape and wrap it around.
We're talking about ships dragging anchor here, and there has been a little bit of sabotage happening out there that people have been worried about.
I know. I do wonder whether it's more sabotage more so than accidental. So in 2022, there was the Nord Stream pipeline, which was basically taking Russian natural gas to Europe, and that was definitely sabotaged.
Yeah.
So there is this issue. Now, what do you do about it? The ocean's a big place, and these various, whether they be pipelines or cables, are long. And so how do you keep an eye on that? Now, one of the problems is you go underwater, you can't really transmit that information that you're looking at back to the surface easily. That's
not in real time, no.
Not in real time. That's a major drama. Air, so we know, and the big difference here is that when we send electromagnetic signals, so radio signals via air, they degrade at inverse square rule. Yeah. But when you go underwater, you degrade exponentially. So it attenuates exponentially. So when you talk about Wi-Fi frequencies, 2.4 gigahertz, you might get a few centimetres into water before it drops out. So
you really need to be connected by a physical line if you're going to be passed. Or
what you do is, what they're doing now is AI is sending underwater drones, and they're going along looking at the area that some of these cables are, and then they're coming back to the surface to then send off the information.
You go.
So, because again, you can do it, submarines can communicate, but they're going very low frequency.
Yep.
And you can't send a lot of data. The lower the frequency, the less data you can send. So you're getting it through water, but not maybe kilometres, but you're getting it through waters, maybe hundreds of metres, but again, not much information associated with that. So what they're doing now is they're basically sending out AI underwater drones. They're just manoeuvring around these various areas, keeping an eye on activities there, looking at things that might be on the seabed. Is that just a bunch of rocks, or is that an explosive there? What have we got there to see what might be used in sabotage? What ships are coming around the place? Why is that ship going along there? This isn't a common shipping line. I don't know that we need that ship going there. So lots of investigation of lots of information, and then again, we've talked about it before, AI is good at analysing a bunch of stuff and then taking that and saying, right, this is something we need to be aware of, and this over here, not so much. I mean, wouldn't it be better if people were just nice? Couldn't they just be nice to each other? There's a lot of
effort. Leave each other's cables and pipelines alone.
That's right. That's my pipeline. Leave it. But there's a lot of work, a lot of effort that goes into running these various cables and pipelines. So, you then have to go and create a whole bunch of extra work if you go and wreck it, and you know they're going to repair it. It's just leave them alone and be nice is the message here. Because I don't know many of these cables are damaged through natural activities or even accidental activities. Typically it's through sabotage. But hopefully AI to the rescue until AI comes up with a way of circumventing AI and then sabotaging it regardless.
Sabotaging the AI, sabotaging the AI.
That's right.
Yeah, it's going to happen.
It is.
Oh dear, and that's all there is for another episode, folks. It's time for us to cut and run. Thanks for another cracking tech talk, Matt.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just going to go and keep working on that vibranium. I do like the idea.
And I'm interested in it too, because I want a shield just like Captain America.
Yeah, that's right. It seems so obvious. Someone did say to me, well, wouldn't it be cool? You could just build a car out of vibranium. And that sounds good, but we used to build cars that were pretty solid. Back in the 60s and 70s, there were cars that were like tanks.
Yep.
But if you had an accident in one of them, the car looked perfect at the end of it, but the little bit of soft flesh inside ended up a bit of gel.
Not so good.
That's
Not
right.
So good.
So our car is now designed to absorb lots of impact, so humans are coming out of it much better, but they absorb it by basically deforming and not coming back to the way they were. So, but maybe vibranium, if it could absorb that and then come back, maybe that'd be a great way to build a car.
Well, if my shield doesn't return to me when I throw it away, I'm not interested. I don't care what it does otherwise.
Oh, we've got boomerangs. Surely, if that's all you want, just go and get a boomerang. That does the trick. I don't know if it defends you against anything else.
Nah, but it's not as cool as a vibranium shield.
No. Especially if it's got an American flag painted on it.
Thanks for tuning in to Tech Talk. Once again, folks, it's a pleasure to have you on board week after week after week. I'm your host, James Eddy, and we're looking forward to seeing you again in another week's time. Don't forget to like us, subscribe to us, tell your friends all about us. We love you, and we love having you week after week listening in to us. We hope to catch you again in 1 week's time. Take care until then.